Hello, welcome back to the Research Methodology Group at Kyoto University. I am today's presenter, Jingjing Lin. So this is the second episode of case study presentation. As we mentioned before, it is based on the textbook written by Ying. And we've already covered chapter 1 and 2 in the first episode of the events. And in this third chapter, we're going to present in this event. It's going to introduce what to do before case study data collection. That covers majorly 5 aspects, as you can read from the screen. And we're going to go in detail one after another in the following 20 to 25 minutes. So let's go to the first aspect, researcher skills and values first. So as the researcher of a case study, you have to possess several skills and some value. For the data collection of a case study, it is often unroutinized, very unlike experiment. It cannot follow a straightforward and linear procedure. It requires researchers to have an active inquiry mind to ask good and continuous questions along the process. Case studies involve people, and as researcher, you have to bear in mind the ethical conduct when using people and their personal information for research purpose. It is also very common to have unanticipated events that take place to interrupt the research plan. Researchers need to be adaptive and consider these events as opportunities rather than threats. Data in case studies come from very different sources and can be hidden between lines. The meaning can be hidden between lines when you interact with these sources. Try to be a good listener and try your best not to be biased. Also, stay firm to issues you are studying. Remind yourself about the purpose of the study. Refresh your mind, the understanding about the theoretical or policy related issues. Don't get carried away by the large volume of information and diverse sources of data over the process. Overall, being a researcher doing case study, you have to act like an information detective. You arrive at the site, observe and listen to all possible evidences, adapt to sudden discoveries or events, stay firm to original intention of catching the criminals, and be very careful to protect the vulnerables, such as a witness or the victim's family involved in the case. It sounds pretty cool, isn't it? Let's move to the second aspect, preparation and training. So you have to pay very much special care to ethical research practices when it is involving human subjects, and that's the case for case studies. You have to get approval from often a research committee in your university, and you have to look for some general guidance from community of your subject or association of your professional practice, and also act according to your personal ethical rules. As for training, no matter you are doing a single case study as an individual researcher or to conduct case study as a team collaboration, you have to be trained to be senior and independent researcher first. As for the second case, all members should contribute to case study protocols development. And training contents should cover all phases of the planned case study. The goal is to the every person in the team understand basic concepts, terminology, and methodological issues related to the study. And along the whole process, it should be discussions oriented rather than lectures from one side to the other. Quite a list of problems can be revealed by training, such as the flaws in the case study design or even the initial definition of the study questions, or incompatibilities among team members. Some may not share the perspective of the study or its sponsors, or impractical time deadlines or expectations regarding available resources. Now we're going to put a lot of focus on designing and developing case study protocol, which is considered a formal document capturing the entire set of procedures involved in the collection of data for a case study. So case study protocol, CSP for short. The 4 sections that are commonly covered in a CSP. The first one is overview of the case study, which can include background information, objectives, case study issues, and relevant readings. The second section is data collection procedures, which can include procedures for protecting human subjects, identification of likely sources of data, presentation of credentials to field contacts, and other logistical reminders. The third section is protocol questions, which can include specific questions that the case study researchers must keep in mind in collecting data and the potential sources of evidence for addressing each question. The fourth section is tentative outline for the case study report, which can include formats for the data, use and presentation of other documentation, and bibliographic information. In the following slides, I'm also gonna use a CSP example document, which is attached as Appendix C in a report by National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, published in 2015. You can find the full reference in the end of this presentation, and you can go to the presented link as shown on the screen to have the full access to the document. So for the first section, overview of the case study, you have to write about the mission and goals in this part. Also introduce sponsors and audience if there is any sponsor. You also need to present about research questions, hypotheses, and the propositions. And also theoretical framework for the case study and key readings involved. Sometimes also the role of protocol in guiding the case study researchers is presented. Note that the protocol serves as agenda for the researcher's line of inquiry. Now, let me use this video to explain you in the template that I use. Use the content of it to introduce the first part, which is overview of case study in this template.
So in this template, the first part is consistent with the Ying's suggestion is to introduce the overview of this case study. Under it, there are several sections. The first one is to introduce the background information of the project and the subject they are studying. The second part is relevant definitions such as quality, quality assurance, etc. The third part is to describe the statement of purpose of this project, including objectives and research questions. And the final part of this overview is to introduce the documents and research reports that this protocol is largely based on. And that's the overview of this case study in this template.
It covers more or less the major elements that we mentioned from the last slide. Okay, so if you want to see the detail, you can read the report by using the link provided on this slide. Now let's go to the second section, data collection procedures. Usually under this part, you provide the name of contact persons for doing field work. You provide a data collection plan, which covers the type of evidence to be expected. It includes the roles of people to be interviewed, the events to be observed, and any documents to be reviewed in the field. Also, you can introduce about expected preparation work prior to field activities. So the preparation identifies specific information to be reviewed and issues to be covered prior to field work. Again, this comes an introduction video explaining the second part of the template, which is called field procedures.
In the second part of this case study protocol,
Let me
as
quickly
the field procedures that is corresponding to the second part of INS procedure, namely data collection procedures. Under this part, there are several sections as well. First, they list project researchers, as you can see from the list. And then they explain how they select different cases for this project. So as you can see from the highlight, they have 6 to 12 case studies to perform, and they did 2 pilot studies before the official case studies. They had an initial survey as well to actually have a look to identify alternative quality management systems currently in use. And they have a case study project selection protocol that involves 3 tiers of project information. And they submitted the case study candidates to NCHRP panel for approval. And these are 3 tiers that each candidate must have this kind of information to be qualified into the final list. They use different sources to collect cases, including agencies, reports, etc. This part is the criteria that aims to select the proper case study for the research. And this part involves how they actually select case study informants who are giving information to them to support their case studies. Their potential interviewees are displayed like this in this list. And as you can see from these tables, they give out the layout or the structure of data they're expecting from the interviews from different sources of informants, such as this is what the case study is, the name, the location, the organization, and the contact person, the researcher, the person, the informant contact information. And this another table shows case study name, contacted which informant, who was a lead investigator, what kind of interview type, the date of the interview, and any other follow-up activity and the date of it. And this shows what's the name of the case study and what kind of materials, documents they received.
Now let's move to the third section, which is protocol questions. The protocol questions in the case study protocol, they are considered the case study instrument. There are two critical features distinguish these questions from those in surveys. The first feature is that those questions in protocol are posed to researcher instead of interviewee. It aims to keep researcher on track during the data collection process as their line of inquiry. Each question should be accompanied by a list of likely sources of evidence. The second feature is concerning 5 levels of questions. For case study protocol, the second level questions are involved. It's about each case which represents your line of inquiry. Very different from level 1, which is questions verbalized to specific interviewees. Let's compare the two levels in level 1 and level 2. Imagine the clinician's practice with the patient. In the mind of the doctor, he might imagine a lot of medical terms he's thinking about to diagnose the patient. But when he's verbally communicating with the patient here, he cannot talk about all these parameters that are very complicated for patients to understand. Instead, he's going to say, do you feel constant fatigue? That's much easier to understand. So in the field, it is not easy to retain the level 2 questions in the back of your mind while articulating level 1 questions when interviewing people. It needs practice and training. So the protocol is for the data collection from a single case, even when it is part of a multiple case study, and it is not intended to serve the entire project. That is something you need to bear in your mind. Now let's try to understand two concepts here. One is unit of analysis, one is unit of data collection. For the unit of analysis, it often means the case you are studying. The unit of data collection involves the source of the evidence you use to investigate the case. There are two common distortions here. One is you try to collect data from individuals, but the case under investigation is collective beings. In this case, protocol questions need to be about the organization instead of the individuals. The second type of distortion is you try to collect data from organization, but the unit of analysis is individual beings. In this case, protocol questions need to be about individuals instead of the organization. In this table, it demonstrates how you can combine units of data collection with units of analysis when you are doing the design of a case study. Let's say you want to study some individuals, but you can collect data actually from two levels, either from individual or from organization. When it is collecting data from individual sources, you ask their individual behavior, their attitudes, and their perceptions. When you collect data about individuals from the organization level, you often go to check individual employee records, or you interview with individuals' supervisors or other employees in the same organization. Let's see the example in the template.
The third part of this template, the title is requested documents, but in fact, the majority of it is about case study questions. The major evidence source is interviews. However, they also did a questionnaire before those surveys. And this video is just to show you how detailed those questions can be in the protocol. So they introduce some background questions, overall understanding of quality questions, and questions on the level of organization is listed under here, as you can see. And then it's also divided into different phases, like design phase, quality management, that's questions related to it. There's construction phase, quality management questions here, and project specific questions that's different from organization level questions already. And this include also different sections under it. And you also have it's very long, long list of questions. Then you also have these additional questions that are not included in other levels of questions stated above. So as you can see that the questions are quite long.
Okay, that's a brief traveling through the third part of this template, mainly showing you how detailed the questions in a protocol can be like. So let's now move to the fourth section, which introduces tentative outline for the case study report. Often this part is omitted from most case study plans. But consider two possibilities regarding report outline when you are adding this part to your protocol. One is consider publication of this case study into an academic journal, or so the format requirement of the journal will guide your outline of the report. In another case, is that this report was commissioned by a sponsor, and they already have some preference in the outline and structure requirement of the final report. No matter which case, you better start from the end to understand what needed to be delivered as the output of the research, and such end result should guide your research from the beginning as well. This can help to avoid revisiting the field for missing data that is needed in the final report. Now let's move to the fourth part of this chapter, that is to screen candidates. When you have less than 12 available candidates, you use one-phased approach. You can either ask people who know your candidates well, or use documentation that record details of each candidate. You define a set of operational criteria to judge the qualified candidate prior to screening. For the single case study, the candidate with most available data sources will be eligible. For multiple case study, best fit the replication design. For two-phased approach, you often face more than 12 available candidates. In this way, you can collect relevant quantitative data about the entire pool from some archival source. You can also define relevant criteria for stratifying or reducing the number of candidates to 12 or fewer in order to conduct a one-phased approach. Let's move to the final part of this chapter, that is pilot case study. A pilot case study helps the researchers to refine the data collection plans regarding content of the data and the procedures to be followed. Remember, a pilot study is not a pre-study. It is more formative, assisting the development of relevant lines of questions. A pilot test occurs before seeking approval from for instance, IRB. A pilot case study can be so important that substantial resources may be devoted to this phase of the research. Main criteria for selecting a pilot case involves convenience, access, geographic proximity, just like 7-Eleven. The scope of the pilot inquiry can be much broader than the ultimate data collection plan. It can cover both substantive and methodological issues. The pilot data provides considerable insight into the basic issues to be studied. The pilot cases can provide information about relevant field questions and logistics of the field inquiry. Reports from the pilot cases. It is mainly written for the research team. The report should be explicit about the lessons the team learned during the process. If multiple cases are planned, the report from one pilot case can also help to modify further pilot cases. If done right, the final pilot case might become a good prototype for the final case study protocol. That will be the end of this presentation. Thank you for watching.